Okay, Phil, we're doing an episode with four movies tonight, all based around. Well, I don't know if you want me to spoil the surprise, but all based around the music of Donovan, basically.
You
Good.
said it just like Dylan there. That's
Did I?
exactly how Dylan.
It wasn't
And
intended.
tell me who this Donovan is.
Donovan. Yeah, he says it's almost like Dun Donovan.
Yeah.
So I'll let you take the reins. I've seen two of the four films. You'll be doing most of the talking for sure, though. Been some time, so
Okay. So yeah, there's four films that showed up in the clipography at the end, but I'll actually throw in, I think, five or six others. It's one of the two entries in the book. I was thinking about it. It's also the last entry in the book, at least until I expanded it a bit. It was the last entry. One of two entries in the book that aren't centered around a film or where the film doesn't dictate the blog entry or the mini chapter in the book.
yeah.
The first one, or the only other one, would be the entry that was based around the song "Time After Time,"
Yeah.
where wrote about Stranger Things, Romeo and Michelle, and got whatever the
Yeah, what
third
was
one
the
was.
other one? Yeah, I shouldn't remember.
uh, and the video itself. This one is, as you pointed out, centered around an artist, Donovan. And and I don't know when I was thinking, trying to remember tonight when I noticed. It goes back well before the book, but at some point going to the movies, I just noticed Donovan kept cropping up, and he was always used in a great way. I was trying to think, did I even mention it in one of the second the revision of the pop piece, the Scorsese piece that I ended up sort of revising a bit for Andrew Palmer in New Zealand? I don't know. I may even mention that early. I'm not sure. But Donovan just seemed to be in so many films. And as I got towards the end of the book, that was also an entry I wrote. Most of those entries were just collected right from the blog, but that's when I wrote specifically for the book. I said, that's how I'm going to finish it. Um, it seemed to be the time to do it. So before we get into the films that actually show up in the book, I'll very quickly deal with the ones that didn't make it in the book, but they're kind of background. So the first time that I'd ever seen Donovan on film, and it's a pretty famous scene. It's in the Pennebaker, D.A. Pennebaker Dylan documentary, Don't Look Back. It's a famous scene because, if you know the film, Dylan, a fair amount of the film, it's either on the concert stage or it's in his hotel room. And he's doing, all sorts of stuff is going on there. He's got his entourage around him. People are parading in and out. Joan Baez, looks like she'd rather be dead than anywhere but there. So one scene, I think Alan Price might be in the scene too of the animals, and he's just left the animals. Uh, Donovan is there. Now, he's already been mentioned in the film. Dylan was kind of making, because Donovan was also playing England at the time,
Right.
obviously his home country, and he was getting lots of press. And Dylan was, I'm sure joking, almost pretending like he'd never heard of him. He picks up a newspaper. Who is this Donovan character?
Yeah.
And he would laugh. And it's funny. It's very funny the way he does it. So suddenly Donovan's in Dylan's hotel room, and Marcus wrote about this scene. And even though he's right, the scene is memorable because Donovan plays a song for Dylan, and then Dylan plays one for him. And I was looking at a Reddit thread about that scene, and I agree with what somebody said. It must have taken just an unbelievable amount of courage for Donovan to play one of his songs in front of Dylan, who at this point is, as big as the Beatles. This is he has another year where he gets even bigger, but this is like the height of mid 60s Dylan. So for Donovan to pick up a guitar and play one of his songs, that really was kind of courageous. So the Donovan song, Donovan plays a song called "To Sing for You," and now this is where I think I agree with the whole, how why the scene is famous, because it's sort of Dylan wiping the floor with Donovan. The song that Donovan sings, it's really good. It really is. It's not one of his most famous songs. It's his folky side, but I always really enjoy that song. I looked it up tonight. It shows up before, Mellow Yellow and Sunshine Superman. It's on one of the folk albums. He plays this folk song. I think it's really good. Dylan seems to enjoy it. But then Dylan picks up a guitar and he sings It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. And of course, again, he's at the height of his power. It's amazing. Donovan really does look a little rattled, or he looks sick to his stomach almost at one point. Like he's
Yeah.
looking there saying, I can't do that, basically, is the expression on his face. And Dylan knows how good he is. He smiles. He's singing the chorus at one point where he stretches out the words in the chorus. And he flashes his smile like, can you believe how good I am? That I could come up with this. And it's a great scene. So that's the first encounter with Donovan. Then 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later, a very well-known British filmmaker, Ken Loach, who always, it's the film actually that he often shows up um, for in greatest ever lists. Not really high up, but it's often mentioned as a film called Poor Cow, which I've seen once. I really don't remember anything about it. It's with Terrence Stamp, but I don't know if you caught it, Scott. I mailed you the clip
Yeah.
before we started. Terrence Stamp sings Donovan's Colors, which will become important later in this conversation. And he does a good job on it. I don't remember the context. He's singing for a woman and her son. I guess he's involved with them. And that's really nice and that's memorable. And then I think you got to go all the way forward. And we're really going to keep this to a minimum because we vowed last week no more Scorsese. It shows up in Donovan shows up in a memorable scene in Goodfellas, Atlantis, the scene where with Billy Batts, he's just gotten out of prison. He gets into an argument with Pesci at the bar. Pesci goes away, he comes back, and he and De Niro just they beat the living hell out of Billy Batts. Not quite to death, because that's kind of where the film starts. He's in the trunk. They're taking him to be buried, and he's still alive. And they have to open up the trunk. So that's a memorable use of Donovan. And I think that's the one that kind of brought him back into the consciousness of filmmakers, because at that point he starts to show up a lot. I'm going to sort of go out of order chronologically here. So before we get to the four that I wrote about, he also shows up in a Steven Soderbergh film called The Limey. And he's used in a really interesting way because Terrence Stamp is in The Limey with Peter Fonda. I meant to look up the context. I think Terrence Stamp might play a record executive or, Phil Spector type. Steven Soderbergh uses the clip from the Ken Loach film. Terrence Stamp, 30 years later, 20 years later, whatever, is watching himself in the Ken Loach film play Colors.
Yeah.
That's why it makes me think he's a musician or a record executive. He's sort of looking back on his career. Then the other one I want to mention, and it's really great. It's in Alexander Payne's Election. Have you seen that?
Yeah. I've seen it a couple of times, but I gotta say I don't remember the song.
Well, remember the guy. He's in American Pie, who the jock type, really popular, breaks his leg, and he runs for school president against Reese Witherspoon. And then just throw the whole thing into chaos. His sister gets involved in the election. Tracy, I can't remember her name. She's such a famous character. She gets involved in the election. She's gay, and not out to anybody. But she gives this really funny speech in the school gym, making a whole mockery of it. She does it so she can get kicked out of the election and basically get kicked out of school. She wants to go to an all girls school. Mm-hmm. And then we hear her a voiceover. And the actress who played her, she died very young. She died 4 or 5 years ago. She was also on Freaks and Geeks. Can't remember her name. She gets kicked and she gets her wish. And she's in voiceover talking about, now I'm in girls school and everything's going great. And I've met the love of my life. And she's on a swing set with this other girl at the school, and Donovan's Jennifer Juniper's playing. It's just so perfect. It plays for about 30 seconds, and it's utter bliss for her. And it's that type of song too. Um, so of those songs, except for Goodfellas, where Atlantis is kind of a little bit, it's a weird Donovan song. I wouldn't call it sinister like some of the other ones we're going to talk about, but it's definitely weird. We see the folky side of Donovan. Okay. Um, Actually, I think there's three sides of Donovan. There's the folky side, there's the side we're going to talk about in a minute, and then I would put Jennifer Juniper into sort of the hippie side.
Right.
But it doesn't sound like Mellow Yellow or Sunshine Superman, but there's that side of Donovan too. So the four I'm going to talk about, and we'll go in chronological order. First of all, I rewatched three out of the four. One of them I definitely didn't need to. Is Gus Van Sant's "To Die For," 1995. Have you seen that?
Yep. See,
Okay.
I really want to see that again, actually.
Yeah, holds up really well. I've probably seen it three or four times in my life. Spaced out over a number of years. It holds up really well. I was thinking that I think it fits in with two other films around the same time. One comes slightly earlier, one a little later. You can find it kind of fits in with the Truman Show, the four Natural Born Killers and the Truman Show, and that all three of them are really trying to grapple with the changing media landscape, right?
Yeah.
Natural Born Killers and To Die For are both about the celebrity killer and the glamorization of celebrity killers, murderers, serial killers, what have you.
Yeah.
And then To Die For overlaps with the Truman Show, and that they're both kind of dealing with the idea of complete loss of self,
Right.
where both you where and in To Die For, the one girl says, or Nicole Kidman tells the one girl, and one girl repeats it at the end, that why would you ever do anything if it's not going to be on TV? And actually, Warren Beatty makes fun of that idea in the Madonna documentary, Truth or Dare. I remember that where,
Oh, really?
yeah, she says something, or the camera's running or something, and the guy says no, although obviously a camera is running somewhere, we wouldn't have that. And then Warren Beatty sort of sarcastically says, "Oh, why would you do anything if it's not being filmed?"
Wow.
So both of those films kind of deal with that idea, segueing into the internet, that our lives have just completely lost all privacy. So I was thinking how those two films go together nicely. It's a great cast. Nicole Kidman, of course, she's great in so many films. She's like a really great actress. And I want to mention Joaquin Phoenix. I don't know if it was his first film, but it was his first film where he got any attention. And when I was watching it, I was thinking Nicole Kidman was already a great actress, and he's great to die for. I think his brother was already dead at this point. I was wondering, was she watching him thinking, her being so great herself, was she thinking, wow, this guy is going to be great?
Hmm.
Like she's probably not all that much older than him at that time. She's
Yeah.
playing maybe a little bit older, I think, than probably what she was at the time.
Yeah. I don't
Um,
know where does that fall in her filmography? Is
1995, she's definitely on the cusp of huge fame.
okay.
Um, I don't think she's done a really super fame. Eyes Wide Shut, she really kind of broke through. But
Which is
To
great.
Die For was a breakthrough film for her. Yeah,
If
she's
to die,
already with Tom Cruise. I think she's already with Tom Cruise.
okay. If to die for was 95, though, that
Yeah.
doesn't your Madonna theory would be reversed.
Oh, I know that's earlier. That's 91, right?
Okay.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
It
that's
just
earlier. Yeah.
no, I'm not grouping that in though. It just popped into my head that Warren Beatty
Oh,
said,
okay. I thought you mentioned like he was kind of quoting it, or he's just saying the same
no.
kind of idea. I see what you're
Yeah,
saying. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's
He
perfect.
came up with that idea almost first.
Yeah, that's brilliant, actually. Yeah.
Because someone almost quotes his line exactly in To Die For. So you've got those two. Ileana Douglas is just great as Joaquin Phoenix's sister. Casey Affleck, one of the Ben Affleck's brothers, he's good. He doesn't have as big a role. And then there's this one, the third sort of lost teenager in that film. She's great. And I had to look her up. Her name is Allison Foley. She plays the young girl who probably has a crush on Nicole Kidman. Nicole Kidman kind of mocks her for it at one point. She's great. She did go on to do other stuff, a couple of prominent films, but she hasn't. I don't know, the career that you might think she was going to have. Certainly never became as big as Joaquin Phoenix. Then on top of that, you've got Dan Hedaya as the father from Dick. We
Right.
talked about him.
Yeah.
Wayne Knight from Seinfeld. He's great as the station manager.
Mm.
Seinfeld had been on the air for 2 or 3 years, but Newman wasn't yet famous. And do you remember? I know it's probably been a while for you. Do you remember who plays the hired mafioso who basically takes Nicole Kidman out in the last scene and kills her?
Well, I'll take a. I'm cheating a little bit because I just looked up the movie before. I wouldn't have remembered this, but I did notice that David Cronenberg is in the movie.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty
it's
wild. I
great.
don't remember him in that scene though, but
Oh, I remember sitting
that's
in the
amazing.
theater the first time, and it's like, whoa, I can't believe it. That's David Cronenberg.
Wow.
Who was, I can't remember. I think maybe
Kind of Dead Ringers. Or no,
his
that was
career hit a
much. Dead Ringers was a few years earlier.
yeah, his career kind of hits a peak in the mid to late 80s, and he was in a bit of a lull there, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the cast is great. Before talking about the Donovan song, there is uh one other great musical bit and one other I got to talk about. So there's a great bit with Sweet Home Alabama. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think so. I think Nicole
Nicole Kidman,
dancing to that or something.
she's sort of
Gyrating.
manipulating. She's in the process of manipulating these teenagers to get them to kill her husband. She's out in the car with Joaquin Phoenix, and it's raining. And I don't know, they may have just had sex. Anyway, she gives him some big emotional speech, faking, pretending to be emotional. And then Sweet Home Alabama comes on, I think the radio. I don't know if they're playing I guess it would be a CD at the time. And suddenly, just on the dime, she says, "Oh, I love this song." And she hops out, and she jumps on the hood of the car, and
Yeah.
starts driving. And he just, he's like mesmerized by this. That is great. And then here's the weirdest thing, Scott. I started watching it on Sunday night. Monday, I went out in the afternoon. Saw American Fiction. I got home Monday, finished watching To Die For. Go online, went to the message board, and I find out that Eric Carmen died.
Oh yeah, I heard
All
about that. Yeah.
myself is in To Die For. It's like
Oh
the third
really?
prominent. Yeah, like I'm
Wow.
sitting there watching this film with all by myself, which certainly is, you don't you don't hear the raspberries or Eric Carmen in many films. And
No.
then I go online and he died. That was really spooky.
Weird. And I just
Yeah.
got to say, did Eric, God, I almost want to be careful about saying this in case I'm wrong, but I think Eric Carmen became a huge like Trumper in the last few years, right?
Somebody posted that,
Okay, so
and
that is correct. I remember for some reason I came across him on Twitter. It's like, wow, he's like, the James Wood of pop music. It was weird.
I think that's absolutely true. And I was
Yeah.
with my friend Cam yesterday, and he was saying how much he was rediscovering the raspberries, and I mentioned this to him, and he said something that was sort of the way I reacted when I read that. It's like I almost wish you hadn't told me that.
Yeah,
But
I
I was,
know. I know.
I was I don't need to know that.
Yeah.
So the Donovan song and To Die For, it's so memorable. It is Season of the Witch, and it's used and it's done subtly, but not in any way that we have to guess. We know exactly what's happened. In fact, we even see Nicole Kidman's face underneath the frozen ice. She gets away with the murder, through via the legal system. So Dan Hedaya, who you're led to believe all through the film has mob ties. He owns a restaurant. He hires Cronenberg to go kill her. Cronenberg pretends to be a producer from Hollywood or TV guy from Hollywood who's interested in one of Nicole Kidman's harebrained ideas. And she's meeting him to give him an audition tape that she's recorded at home. And he says, "Come on with me. I want to show you something." And that's it. And then we get a little bit of the aftermath. We cut back to the young girl, and that's where you get this great shot where she says something like, "Yeah, again, TV." She told me if it's worth doing, it should be on TV, or if it's not on TV, it's not worth doing it. We see her; she goes from one frame into about 200 frames.
Hmm. Oh yeah,
It's
I
a
like that. Yeah.
artful shot. And that's when Season of the Witch basically starts. And Matt Dillon, haven't mentioned him yet. He's good in the film. He's Nicole Kidman's husband, who she arranged to have murdered. His sister, who knows that Nicole Kidman's been murdered and is underneath that ice. His sister's a figure skater, Ileana Douglas, and as Season of the Witch plays, she does some figure skating moves on the ice when Nicole Kidman is underneath.
That's amazing.
It's great. It's so creepy, and it gave me a good opportunity to read the Vargas quote that I used in the book, which was part of my whole mindset, paying attention to all these Donovan songs. He emphasized that creepy, weird, sinister side of Donovan. It's in the Stranded Disc. He's right. I don't remember what album. He's writing about whatever album Season of the Witch is on. And the exact quote is, those words were mostly benign, talking about the other songs and Donovan's trippy dippy stuff. Those worlds were mostly benign, but not in the still scary Season of the Witch, where Donovan stretched out his syllables until they hung over you like a curse. This was a sure warning of the horrors breeding within the idealism of Stone's Gimme Shelter and a lot more prescient, because it's, I guess, 3 years earlier.
Yeah. What year is Season of the Witch?
I think Season of the Witch is 66 or probably 67, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, and he wrote something similar about a Moby Grape song too. How we've talked about this many times. How there was this really sinister side of hippie bands that doesn't get as much attention. Everybody thinks that all hippie music sounds like San Francisco or whatever those anthemic "Come to San Francisco" type songs, or many
sort of lurking in there in a lot of those songs.
Yeah. And we talk about that Jam and Rain song. There's just a whole bunch of them. Jefferson Airplane songs. Blues from an Airplane's very creepy. And Season of the Witch is an example. And that's how it's used. And To Die For Gus Van Sant really captured that. And another film, actually two more of the films I'm going to talk about, they really captured that too. So that's To Die For, 1995. And the next one is a film called L.I.E., Lie, which kind of, it's a double meaning of lie, but also it stands for Long Island Expressway.
Okay.
This film is directed by a guy named, I've got my tab up here.
It's a fairly obscure film, isn't it? I looked it up and I couldn't find a lot of information about it.
Got some attention at the time. It's really memorable. It's a really good film. His name is Michael Cuesta, Cuesta.
Right.
And I checked his filmography. He really didn't go on to do much that was very famous. He did direct some episodes of Dexter about the serial killer. I've never seen that show, but I couldn't really identify a film that was well known. Why, it's uncomfortable to talk about what it's about. It's about a pedophile. It's less about him, Brian Cox. We'll talk about Radius in a minute. It's more about the kid who he kind of pulls himself back from preying on this one kid and almost befriends him, who's played by Paul Dano, very young Paul Dano. You know him, right? He's in There Will Be Blood. He's the father in Meet
Brian
the
Wilson stories.
He's in the Brian Wilson story. He plays Brian Wilson, of course. He's a really good actor. He's got a real range there. Those roles that I just mentioned. He's very good as this kid who I think is 12 or 13. And this film also, I was going to mention, belongs with some other films at the time. The one I was thinking about, and I've never seen it, but Larry Clark's Kids.
Oh, yeah.
Mysterious Skin, too. There was this really gritty film about young kids, adolescence, and sexuality at the time. Mysterious Skin is a good one by Greg Akari. I've never seen the Larry Clark film. I saw his follow-up called Bowling, and that has kind of the same feel. So it's about these kind of kids who are, ignored at home, Paul Dano. His father's going through this big crisis. He's a really slick is he a real estate guy or builder, contractor builder, and he's been caught out in some scam, and his life's falling apart. His wife's died, and he's almost like Michael Douglas in Wall Street, the way he dresses. He's played by an actor named Bruce Alban, who I also was watching at the same time as I'm rewatching Ozark, and he has a key role early on in Ozark. And Paul Dano's friend, who's also for maybe a year or two older, who's kind of, he's this guy who's pretending to be really macho. Clearly, he's gay. He's also a hustler. That's what takes place on the Long Island part of. I don't know if it's maybe close to where an off ramp of the Long Island Expressway is, where these pedophiles go and cruise for young kids,
Wow.
and that's what Brian Cox does. And in the intro, kind of prologue of the film, Paul Dano's standing on this bridge, and it's kind of scary with the cars zipping by underneath. He talks about people who died on the Long Island Expressway, including Alan J. Pakula, the director of All the President's.
Yeah.
Mentions someone else really famous. I can't remember who it is, and the character's mother. So, and then he and his friend, this hustler kid, they go and they break into a house, and it's Brian Cox's house, and he's having a party, and they steal a couple of guns, and they get away. But Brian Cox knows all the kids in the neighborhood. He doesn't have any problem tracking down Paul Dano. And I guess I can go right into how hurdy-gurdy man is used, because it's when he goes out to look for Paul Dano to try to find him, but he's also cruising for kids. And as he's going along the streets in his car, hurdy-gurdy man plays. And you can imagine just how great it is. I tried to find a clip online. It is much like Zodiac, we're going to talk about. It is such a creepy song. And I don't know if I ever picked up on that before Zodiac. And by the time I saw Lie, before I saw Zodiac, but by the time I saw Zodiac and started writing the entry, I'd totally forgotten about Hurdy Gurdy Man and Lie. I had to go back, and I have a VHS of the movie. I'm lucky I never would have been able to see it, or I would have ended up paying a lot of money to order it from Amazon. I'd forgotten all about that being. So there's two different films that use the same song, and both of them kind of use it in the same way, just to uncover something unbelievably evil and sinister. He's behind the wheel of his car, the song's playing, and he's doing two things at once. He's trying to get information on Paul Dano, but he's also kind of cruising for kids. And we get shots of kids, ranging from anywhere from 9 to probably older, 14, 15. Brian Cox is living with an 18-year-old kid. I think this kid definitely looks like he's hit 18. And that's one of the subplots of the film, that he basically, once these kids hit a certain age, he discards them. He goes find someone younger. So he does track down, and the song is playing on the radio, because actually he stops the car at one point, and again, he's got a shard of clothing that was left behind at the scene of the crime, and he kind of holds it up, get these kids' attention. But first he switches off the music. You can see him reach for the dial. So it's either playing on the radio, or he's playing, I would say the radio, or he's playing an 8-track or or cassette, cassette, not DVD. I'm trying to place it. 1995, he'd be playing a CD, right? Yeah, and that's it. There's no other music in the film. Like I say, as he gets closer to Paul Dano, it's like he pulls back. He tries to befriend him, because Paul Dano's father gets thrown in prison. And Paul Dano basically reaches a point where he's ready to basically be preyed upon by Brian Cox. And it's Brian Cox who kind of pulls back. I did make a note of Brian Cox. There's 3 or 4 actors I will mention. Brian Cox and Dylan Baker. Dylan Baker, he's in The Americans. He plays that scientist, and he plays a pedophile.
Yeah.
Todd Soldon's film called Happiness. I think it's Happiness. Philip Baker Hall from Boogie Nights and many other things. And you can even throw in Philip Seymour Hoffman. those four actors, they are not afraid to play the creepiest roles, you know.
Yeah.
Some actors wouldn't go near these roles because they're afraid of being, once they play it, they're going to lose their core audience. I mean, Tom Cruise never, although I'll give Tom Cruise credit, he played someone really creepy in Magnolia,
Yeah.
but generally they shy away from those roles. And these guys will take on anything. And Brian Cox, obviously Succession too. Brian Cox is so good in this film, and he's also in. We're talking about Zodiac. He's also in Zodiac, where he's not
Hmm.
playing a well-known. I forgot to look up the guy's name, but he's famous TV show host in San Francisco. Yet he manages to make him seem unwholesome somehow. There's just something
Wow.
about Brian Cox.
Yeah.
So it is a really strong film. It holds up really well.
That's great.
Um, that's 90. That's 2001. So the next one comes up just a year later, 2002, really interesting film. It's called The Rules of Attraction, based on a Bret Ellen Easton novel. And the first interesting thing is the lead character of this, the character's name is Sean Bateman, who in the novel and in the film is the brother of Patrick Bateman from American Psycho.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, same author. But the weird thing is, The Rules of Attraction, the novel was written 3 or 4 years before American Psycho, but then the films are reversed. The film for American Psycho came out first, and Rules of Attraction followed a few years later. So there's overlap with that. It's got a really interesting cast. At least one person went on fairly well known, Jessica Biel, I think her name
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Great looking actress. She's just done many things. I think she might be in one of those series like the ones that Jackie likes, like Dawson Creek or something like that. I don't know.
I can't
The
remember. I don't
OC,
know.
something like that. The lead actor, he had a lot of credits on his page, but couldn't identify him with any one role. His name's James Vanderbeek. He plays Sean Bateman. The guy who plays the third part of this weird triangle, gay student, Ian Somerhalder, was great in the film. I couldn't really find anything that he'd done. Also, Faye Dunaway's in it. Eric Stoltz is in it. So it's got a good cast. It's directed by Roger Avery, who wrote at least parts of. He was kind of a partner of Tarantino's. Wrote at least parts of Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. Like I looked up the credit. It said he wrote the radio stuff in Reservoir Dogs.
Hmm.
And wrote the stories in Reservoir Dogs. Or in Pulp Fiction. I don't know if that means he
Oh,
made up plots of the stories or whether he
yeah.
wrote the story that Christopher Walken tells. I don't know. Some other music that's in it. First thing I'll mention, you'll love this. Afternoon Delight is used as the lead character. Sean Bateman lies in bed and jerks off. Afternoon Delight is playing.
Hilarious.
Faith is used in a really neat way.
Eighth by
The,
George Michael.
yeah, the gay student and and Sean Bateman, the Sean Bateman character, who I think he knows the other guy's gay, but he, pushes him off the whole film. They just start dancing on the bed, kind of imitating video. That's a good scene. Really memorable, upsetting scene where a girl in the bathtub commits suicide with Harry Nielsen's "Without You" playing
Oh, wow.
because she's an unrequited crush on Sean Bateman. Uh, Public Images Rise is used, and then over the end credits, Erasure Stop is used, which is good song. And Blondie and the Go-Go's are in the credits, although I don't really remember the film. So I sent you the clip. I hope you got a chance to watch it. It is great. It's Donovan's colors, and they use the entire song. There are two versions of colors you can find. There's the folk version he recorded early in his career, and that's really good. But then I love the one he did a little later, where he had some soft electric guitar, some sort of jokey things, and then here and there in the song, things that he just said. And they use the entire song, and and that's the other person in the cast I meant to mention. And I meant to copy your name and I didn't. So let me just go to. I just want to go to. I've got the film tabbed here. The other actress who's so interesting. She is really beautiful. Her name is Shannon Sosamon, and she plays Lauren. And so basically, the film is Sean Bateman's in love with Lauren. Lauren's in love with her ex-boyfriend, and Paul's in love with Sean Bateman. And Jessica Biel is just there as kind of the fourth wheel. She sleeps with her character, Laura sleeps with Sean, which really upsets Lauren, et cetera, et cetera. But this actress, Shannon Sosamon, who's in the clip with colors, she's so great in this film and just, again, very striking.
She's the one with kind of
She
short hair, sort of.
short black hair. She
Right,
and
right.
Patrick are both headed off. They both wake up and they're both headed off to attend the seminar given by Eric Stoltz, who's just a TA at the university or the private college they go to or whatever. Everyone in this film just rich, spoiled college kids. And Donovan, the color starts right from the moment she wakes up. And then within a few, probably about 15 or 30 seconds, we get a split screen. So we see him on the left-hand side and her on the right-hand side, and everything they're doing, their morning routine and stuff. And it's just so great. The song's playing, and then it does something really neat at the end of the clip. They're still in two separate frames. We don't necessarily know that, but then they start talking to each other. They're really like 4 feet apart, and then the frames come together, and we see it in medium shot. We see a regular non-split screen. And I can't think of a comparable scene.
Yeah.
In a movie where I've seen that, where I've seen two characters split screen. I mean, I'm sure I have, because it's an obvious thing to do with the split screen where you eventually bring the two characters together.
It doesn't seem like it's something that's happened a lot, but actually,
Yeah, the song is just perfect. And actually, after when they part, and then the song strike comes back again. So I just love that. And then from there, the film takes some weird turns, and then we get this bizarre 5 or 10 minutes, 5 minute voiceover with her ex-boyfriend who hasn't been in the film yet. Actually, very brief. It's got, being friend of Tarantino's, it's got this crazy time structure and lots of reverse motion photography and everything. We get this 5 minute voiceover of her ex-boyfriend talking about all the things he's done in Europe as he heads back. It's his section of the film. And then finally, when he gets back there, he doesn't even remember it. She thinks that she's his ex-girlfriend. He doesn't even remember. And, they're all drug addled, and it's got a weird ending. Apparently, the book is very circular. The first sentence is a continuation of the last sentence of the book. Definitely worth watching. If you ever have the time to, probably, I'm guessing you can stream it for free somewhere or stream it very cheaply somewhere.
Yeah, I'll take
And
it. No, sounds
yeah,
good.
it fits in with Tarantino. It fits in with American Psycho, and like I said, there's lots of really good music in it, and it's really a period piece, and also goes along with the other Bret Easton Ellis film, Less Than Zero, which I saw once and haven't seen for a long time, which has
Yeah.
a very soundtrack. I think that was his first novel and the first film, actually.
Was
Uh,
Rules of Attraction, was it a critical?
I think it got some attention. Certainly, it got some notice, being Roger Avary, because
Right.
again, being associated with Tarantino, I think it may have been his first film. I should have checked what he had done subsequently. He did have some success, but I don't know
I
what he's
don't
doing now.
remember how well liked, and we don't have much time left, but I'm trying to remember how well liked To Die For was at the time.
It was very
It got a
critical.
lot of attention, I remember. So
Yeah, box office, I don't know. I don't know that. Yeah, I was going to say I don't know that Gus Van Sant's ever had a huge box office hit. Of course, he has. Good Will Hunting. Uh, his career always fascinates me because he's very much like who's the director that says there's a director of famous quote. He says you do one for you make a ton of money and then you do one for yourself.
yeah,
Coppola tried to operate that way. Spielberg might be the guy that
I
said
think
it.
Scorsese actually said that once.
Scorsese got into that pattern.
Yeah.
You go.
So Phil, before we were so rudely interrupted, you were saying,
We were talking about directors who are able to balance having hit films and making personal films, and how a film like To Die For kind of fits in with Gus Van Sant's career. He's had some hugely successful films from a commercial standpoint, led off by Good Will Hunting. Also, he did the Harvey Milk film. Got to be at least one or two others. And then he's made the small personal films like Drugstore Cowboy and Elephant, film I love. And I just want to put in a plug for another film I absolutely love by Gus Van Sant that got virtually no attention. This was more the commercial side of them. It's called The Promised Land with Tom Cruise, not Tom Cruise, Matt Damon, and one of Hal Holbrook's last roles. I had that on my decade end list. That's an excellent film. So yeah, that's kind of the way that Gus Van Sant's career has gone. Still, I'm watching something by him right now. He's doing the Truman Capote miniseries on FX.
Oh, really? That's it.
Yeah, every episode except for one, which is directed by David Lynch's daughter.
Wow.
Most of that's been really good.